It is Tuesday, June 2nd, and this is episode 7 of Sundry News. From the Daily Wire. Rioters set fire to home with child inside, then block firefighters' access. Emotional police chief details incident. We read that yesterday. Justin Timberlake. I'll help pay bail for arrested protesters. Ted Cruz suggests better use of his money. Minnesota and New York officials say evidence shows weekend riots were planned. Chicago demands Fed investigation into organized violence. Watch. Florida sheriff tells looters his message to residents. I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns. Rioters hurt 50 Secret Service agents. Lincoln Memorial vandalized. Church burned. American flags burned. Yeah. New football season, new protests. Yahoo Sports, read and react. Trending. Sources. Manfred proposes 50 to 60 game season as baseball's stalemate continues. Tiger Woods speaks out after protests. Hire somebody. Raiders Henry Ruggs injured in moving accident. Longtime Auburn coach Pat Dye dead at 80. Will a new football season bring new protests? Morning, friends. Hope you're staying safe. It's probably a good thing in a way that we don't have sports going on right now in the midst of the protests now consuming America's cities. We'd either be looking at canceling playoff games or watching them go on heedless of the reality just outside arena doors. By now, almost every league and team has issued some form of statement on the protests. Protests. Sure, most of the statements are sterile, paint-by-numbers expressions of sadness and solidarity, not all that different from the "in these uncertain times" commercials all over TV. And yes, there's the hypocrisy of, say, the NFL vowing to fight systemic racism after having basically run Colin Kaepernick out of the league for seeking to do exactly that. That is not... Dude, that's not hypocrisy. For him, it was a publicity stunt, and he got all he needed. But we're in a new day in America, a world far removed even from the days in 2016 when Kaepernick knelt to protest the kind of police violence that set off nationwide protests in 2020. Oh, brother. And speaking of Kaepernick, no, he's not coming back into the league. I saw his workout last November with my own eyes. He's not NFL-ready material anymore. But don't be surprised if the protests he staged virtually alone in 2016 become the norm in 2020. There's plenty of opposition, valid opposition, to the idea of protesting during the national anthem, but the acceptance of protesting in general has entered a new phase, and after this past week, a whole lot of individuals, including many who were silent during Kaepernick's day, are speaking up in support of protests. That doesn't mean that they should be doing any sort of demonstration when they're out on the field supposed to be doing their job. If you want to do something politically, it should be on your own time. As our Dan Wetzel notes, you need look no further than today's quarterbacks. Joe Burrow, Carson Wentz, and Trevor Lawrence are three white quarterbacks unafraid to express an opinion on racial issues when, in the not-so-distant past, they might have sat this one out. The times, they are a-changin'. Yeah, well, you know what? They're not working right now. They're doing that. They're expressing opinions on their own fucking personal time. This year's rookie class was at most freshmen in college when Kaepernick knelt. Some were still in high school. All have grown up in a world where protest in public spaces isn't an aberration. And now, like the rest of us, they've seen how peaceful protest can turn to violent chaos in just a matter of minutes. It's worth noting. No one was harmed during Kaepernick's protests. Not a single square inch of property was burned or destroyed. Hell, not even a single minute of game was affected. Given all that we've seen in the last few days, a silent, still, 90-second protest doesn't seem quite so bad anymore, does it? Oh, brother. And we're likely to see it much more this fall. It's unprofessional. Damel, how will college coaches handle the Floyd protests? Boxed in. Who is the best courtside celebrity fan in the NBA? Is it Jack Nicholson? Schwab, the strange story of Reggie Langhorne's retirement. The kicker. Gronk to the rescue. When in need of a little pick-me-up, we can always count on Gronk, who sadly lost his WWE 24/7 belt last night. There's a lot to unpack here, so here goes. 1. Did Gronk steal those sunglasses from Zach Morris? 2. Does he wear the 24/7 belt around everywhere he goes? 3. Finally, the shaking legs really sell it. Thanks, Gronk. Thanks for reading today's issue of Read and React. White nationalist group posing as Antifa called for violence on Twitter. Are you sure it wasn't actually Antifa? I mean, most of them are white, and they might not be very nationalist, but they certainly are supremacists because they seem to think that they have all the answers, that they know what's best. A Twitter account claiming to belong to a national Antifa organization and pushing violent rhetoric has been linked to Identity Europa, a Twitter spokesperson said. Okay. Because Twitter is very trustworthy, huh? The officer who stood by as George Floyd died is Asian American. We need to talk about that. Okay. People don't have a baseline of an understanding of what anti-blackness even is. A Hmong American organizer told NBC Asian America. Okay. Owner whose store called 911 on George Floyd. I wish the police were never called. The owner of Cup Foods pledged on Facebook not to call the cops in the future and to handle incidents like this one using nonviolent tactics. Oh, brother. Recalculate your house payment. Why Americans are refinancing with Quicken Loans. Wife of Derek Chauvin says in divorce filing she wants to change her name. That's not shocking. Kelly Chauvin is not asking for any spousal support in divorce papers she filed. Well, he just lost his job. What's she gonna get? He's not gonna be worth much. Louis Vuitton artistic director Virgil Abloh is being criticized for flexing a $50 donation to a bail fund. After sharing a screenshot of a donation received on Instagram, the fashion star was widely criticized for not giving enough. Shameful. Portland police kneel in solidarity with Black Lives Matter protesters. A group of police officers in Portland, Oregon kneeled on May 31st after being asked by protesters to show their upset over the death of George Floyd. Paige Barletta filmed a video that shows protesters gathered peacefully in Multnomah County Justice Center when members of the police force did so-and-so. Simplified election coverage. Get the information you need to make your vote with focused articles and clear coverage on candidates and issues. Visit the Yahoo News 2020 Election Center. Yeah. Yahoo News is who I'm going to trust for my election information with clear coverage and focused articles. What's hot? It's Yahoo Search again. Yahoo Search is the top destination site to get affordable life insurance. And always start on Yahoo Search for the best resources on CRM for small businesses. CRM. I don't know what that means. Trending now. Kourtney Kardashian, Kayleigh McEnany, Matt Damon, Beastie Boys, Obamacare, Keto Shred Reviews, Ahmaud Arbery, Christy Ane, Maddie Ziegler, Isolation Gowns. 1440. Good morning. It's Tuesday, June 2nd. We're covering police protests across the country, the toll of the coronavirus on nursing homes, and the oldest fossil of a land animal. Need to know. Police protests enter 7th night. Cities across the U.S. were once again seized by protests sparked by the death of George Floyd, a black man who died last week while being taken into custody by blah, blah, blah. Following a weekend of largely peaceful daytime demonstrations that gave way to overnight violence, dozens of cities implemented curfews with the National Guard activated in 23 states. President Trump urged governors to crack down on violent protesters. Audio of the call here. And in evening remarks said he would deploy federal forces if cities failed to quell unrest. In Washington, D.C., where fires flared in front of the White House Sunday, curfew was dropped to 7 p.m. Police used tear gas and rubber bullets to clear out Lafayette Park, which sits just north of the White House, before the president briefly walked across the park to St. John's Church. In Louisville, the police chief was fired after the mayor learned officers involved in a deadly shooting amid protests in the city failed to activate their body cameras. In Las Vegas, an officer is in critical condition after being shot in the head, while looting and vandalism was reported in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and elsewhere. In Minneapolis, tensions eased somewhat, with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz considering pulling back some of the 7,000 National Guard called in for support. Because that's what the problem was, huh? That was the big problem. Separately, an independent autopsy found Floyd died of asphyxiation due to chest and back compression. Of course it did. The findings conflict with a preliminary report from the county medical examiner, which did not conclude asphyxiation was the primary cause of death, but rather the way Floyd was restrained was a contributing factor. However, the medical examiner also ruled Floyd's death a homicide. Amid the chaos, misinformation has run rampant, including a doctored shot from the television series Designated Survivor that took off on social media. Nursing home toll. The impact of the coronavirus on the nation's nursing homes began to come into view yesterday as preliminary data showed an estimated 26,000 deaths and 60,000 cases among residents. The number represents data from 80% of the country's long-term care facilities. Many states with higher death rates were yet to submit data. At least 450 deaths and more than 34,000 cases were reported among staff, reflecting the toll on both the elderly and those assisting them. Perhaps it would have helped if many of those nursing homes weren't forced to take in people that they knew had the virus. Separately, a team of researchers found that limited community transmission of the virus began as early as mid-January in the U.S., following an infection brought from China and from multiple separate carriers from Europe. The findings would once again push back the timeline for the outbreak in the U.S. The U.S. has reported 1.8 million cases with 105,147 deaths as of this morning. Deaths rose less than 1% since yesterday morning. See the moving 3-day average here. Have more questions? Check out our expert-curated coronavirus resource page. Biden looks to clinch nomination. 8 states and Washington, D.C. hold primary elections today. I thought Washington, D.C. I thought that if you lived in Washington, D.C., you couldn't vote. When did that change? 8 states and Washington, D.C. hold primary elections today, the biggest day of voting since the pandemic began in early March. Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden may formally clinch the nomination, though he would need to win roughly 90% of the 479 delegates up for grabs. Supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders have continued to cast ballots for the former candidate, hoping to increase his influence at the party's convention. Browns in, Patriots out. Ryan Clark is more confident in Baker Mayfield leading Cleveland to the playoffs than Jarrett Stidham delivering for New England. A number of key congressional primaries will also be contested. GOP pariah Steve King faces the fight of his political life, with mainstream Republicans backing challenger Randy Feenstra. In New Mexico, former CIA operative Valerie Plame aims to replace outgoing Representative Ben Ray Lujan, who in turn seeks to replace outgoing Senator Tom Udall. See a rundown of the races here. Water bottles are the new black, from Lively. How do you go from recycling bin to runway? With Lively, of course. Meet Lively's first ever eco-friendly swim series that's making a splash in the right direction. The outer fabric of their sustainable swimsuits is made out of 80% recycled polyester, maintaining high style and ultimate comfort while helping to protect the planet. The innovative fiber is made from various plastics that fill our landfills, such as recycled plastic bottles and other pre-consumer plastic waste. So make your splash sustainable today. Use code 1440 at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase at Lively. Please support our sponsors. In the know. Sports, entertainment, and culture. MLB Players Association proposes modified 2020 season including 114-game regular season and option for players to opt out. National Women's Soccer League announces draw for 2020 Challenge Cup tournament to begin June 27th. Who cares? Music industry to observe Blackout Tuesday today and will halt business activity in response to the death of George Floyd. So go out and pirate all that music today. Pat Dye, former Auburn University head football coach and College Football Hall of Famer, dies at 80. Science and technology. Pharma giant Eli Lilly begins human trials for the first medicine designed specifically to treat COVID-19. Treatment relies on human-made antibodies. Oldest known fossil of a land animal discovered in Scotland. The millipede-like animal lived 425 million years ago and was found in the same region as the oldest known stemmed plants. New theory suggests stationary black holes should have at least one light ring where the gravitational field is so strong it bends light into a circular orbit. How are they going to prove that? Business and markets. Facebook employees participate in virtual walkout over the company's inaction on recent President Trump posts. Virtual walkout. So everybody was working from home and they just stopped working? Okay. Fucking Facebook employees, bunch of fucking babies. Retailer Pier 1 Imports to cease operations and liquidate. Will close approximately 500 stores by October. Isn't that old news by now? U.S. manufacturing activity picks up in May after falling to 11-year low in April, an encouraging sign of economic recovery in the sector. Good. Politics and world affairs. Spain records 0 daily coronavirus deaths for the first time since March. Moscow begins reopening as President Vladimir Putin rescheduled referendum, allowing him to stay in power for July 1st. Hong Kong officials ban annual vigil remembering those killed in China's Tiananmen Square massacre for first time in 30 years. Damn. Supreme Court upholds decision allowing Puerto Rico's Financial Oversight and Debt Management Board to be independently appointed. Avoids requirement of having board members confirmed by the Senate. Okay. Whose decision was that? Like, what decision were they upholding? In depth. The Riots of 1968 from the National Archive. Sparked by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and fueled by opposition to the Vietnam War, 1968 is considered one of the most tumultuous years in U.S. history. Through photos, see how its legacy shaped 6 American cities. Probably for the worst. Like a burning theater from Vanity Fair, the precipitous and abrupt drop in demand left the oil market in a mind-bending position in mid-April, with buyers paying to have others take oil off their hands for lack of storage. Here's an inside account of the day oil futures went negative. That's okay. Bras made for lounging. If you didn't think bra and lounging could exist in the same sentence, Lively is the brand for you. They make bras that you can hardly even feel, like no-wire bras, t-shirt bras, and lace bralettes. 100% not going anywhere approved. Use code 1440 at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase at Lively. Please support our sponsors. Etc. Deaths during police encounters have dropped in large cities, but are rising in the suburbs and rural areas. Photos of people coming together to clean up after weekend protests. Well, that's nice. Wouldn't it be nicer if they didn't have to clean anything up? Wouldn't it be nicer if people just weren't sloppy pigs? A stunning visualization of the Earth's plate tectonics. Invest in wine? Vinovest gives investors access to a portfolio of fine wines. Their 100 index has achieved strong positive 5.2% growth yearly to date versus S&P negative 7.29%, with low market correlation and industry returns that beat the S&P 500 over the last 20 years. Invest with Vinovest today. Tesla Autopilot fails to recognize an overturned truck with video. How lockdowns have destroyed our internal clocks. How Hollywood gets the ocean wrong, according to a marine biologist. I'm a little curious. A marine biologist talks about what Hollywood gets wrong about the ocean. An expert chats Finding Nemo and the movies about the deep that are somehow less realistic than the Pixar film about talking fish. Okay. 2020 summer blockbuster season has been put on hold because of the pandemic, but that doesn't mean we can't celebrate the movies from the past that we flocked out for the sun and into air conditioning flocked out of the sun and into air conditioning for. Welcome to The Ringer's return to summer blockbuster season, where we'll feature different summer classics each week. When Hollywood goes out to sea, it's usually to accomplish one of two things: evoke fear or create a feeling of adventure. There are so many movies about the unknowns that lurk in the ocean, something that can be played up through emphasizing terrors of the deep, underwater, Leviathan, etc., carnivorous predators terrorizing our shores, Jaws, although Amity Island's mayor is the real villain of that movie, or a sense of genuine wonder, The Abyss, but not so much the infamously hellish production on James Cameron's film. Other times, ocean movies focus on the elements that bring someone to their absolute limit, all is lost, or on somebody who is stranded in the open ocean, open water, to create more of a philosophical, existential thrill. And sometimes movies are about scientists experimenting on sharks to cure Alzheimer's and accidentally making them super smart. Deep Blue Sea forever. The catalog of great ocean cinema is as engrossing as it is varied, and if half of this stuff actually happened, most people wouldn't dare step foot in the water again. Thankfully, presumably, what we see on the big screen doesn't always get the ocean right, even though that doesn't make these films any less entertaining. But to separate fact from fiction and know what the experts think about Hollywood's interpretation of the ocean, I called up Dr. Stephen Kajura, a professor at Florida Atlantic University's Department of Biological Sciences, for a wide-ranging chat about ocean movies to celebrate Finding Nemo's 17th anniversary. Yes, I will take any reason to phone a marine biologist and run with it. In the past, Dr. Kajura has graciously answered all my pressing, silly questions about Aquaman and 47 Meters Down Uncaged, two films that, shockingly, aren't all that scientifically accurate. By the time we finished talking for the third time, I began to sense a trend in the larger ocean movie canon. Like many industries during the pandemic, the theatrical experience has been put on hold, but we did get a new ocean movie in January called Underwater. It follows the workers at a deep-sea drilling operation in the Marianas Trench that is struck by an earthquake. Naturally, as they try to get back to the surface, they're also being attacked by these creatures hungry for human flesh. What's your takeaway from that? You know, I'm completely unaware of this movie. I didn't even know this one existed. Maybe they're not expecting much from it. It's easier to let it go at that time of the year. That's what January movies are for, unfortunately. But one of the things I did appreciate about Underwater was that a lot of attention was paid to the dangers when you're that far down. One character's helmet is defective and he implodes from the pressure. It's really gnarly stuff. I assume that's a more realistic danger than flesh-eating monsters. What else should someone worry about being at those depths? That's one of the interesting things that I always see with these movies, where people are in these deep-sea submersibles or whatever is the rescue team will bring them up to the surface right away to save them, but in reality you would kill them by doing that. You've been under pressure for so long, and if you were to decompress rapidly like that, you would basically, well, you'd get an extreme case of the bends and die. So I'm glad that they were at least cognizant of that. Actually, at the end of the movie, a couple characters do shoot up to the surface, and they definitely don't adhere to the slow decompression. It's more like a jetpack going off. Ha ha ha. They take their helmets off, breathe the fresh air, and all is great. Yeah, well, not really. So the flesh-eating monsters in question are around the same size as humans, but at the end of Underwater you find out they're all the offspring of a huge Cthulhu-like monster. As was the case with the Meg, I'm guessing there's no chance of discovering some giant monstrosity in the Marianas Trench. There's just not enough energy down there for them. The bigger you are, you need a lot of calories, and there's just not that much productivity in a deep-sea environment to be able to support big organisms. Also, the bigger you are, you feed farther down on the food chain. Think of whales. Whales are the biggest thing in the ocean, but they feed on little tiny plankton, krill, things like that. And they need to be feeding on these little tiny things because you need a lot of it to support their massive size. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I thought this was going to be a list. I hate reading interviews. Mom and daughter overachieve with sidewalk chalk drawings. What it's like to be fired over Zoom. Clickbait. A sparkling dinosaur heads to space. Okie dokie. History book. First Lady Martha Washington born, 1731. Indian Citizenship Act is signed into law in the U.S., 1924. Baseball legend Babe Ruth retires, 1935. Queen Elizabeth II is coronated, 1953. Happy birthday soccer star Abby Wambach, 1980. It's a heavy burden to look up at the mountain and want to start the climb. Abby Wambach. Okay. If you want to start the climb, why is it a heavy burden? Whatever. That's all for today. Thank you very much.